There is something about horror that has made it intertwined with entertainment and gaming since the very beginning of time. There's something about pulling that loved one in close to you and getting all warm and cuddly, whether it be man or woman, or a bunch of men or a bunch of women, a giant orgy of cuddling to hide the fear that is soaking deep down inside of your pantalones. But that feeling of the soaking deep down in your loins is why we hunt horror out. It is why it stays such a staple, because there's something about being afraid. And that brings us to today's topic. I found a couple of games that have almost been lost to time, created by John George Jones.
I didn't know the country singer made video games.
What are you even talking about?
George Jones, the country singer, the guy who got a DUI on a tractor.
Why would I be talking about the country singer? Why would I bring the possum up in any context when I'm talking about video games?
You were the one that said George Jones. I'm just adding context.
Well, you should just stop, you holographic idiot, because this is before you were even a thought in a Bungie developer's nutsack.
Fine, I'll just leave.
Thank God, I think that's the fastest I've ever gotten rid of her. Anyway, back to the subject matter at hand. I was doing a little digging through the history of horror video games, and something had caught my eye. A couple of games developed by John George Jones, no, not the country singer, first of which being called Go to Hell. You can't tell me that cover art doesn't slap all sorts of clit. I mean, just come on, just that clean white with a little bit of blood dripping. Enough to make you come. But the game kind of broke down in the similar way as a game like the Atari 2600 Haunted House. You went room to room collecting, and this game crosses. But what really made this stand out is at the time the ZX Spectrum, which was honestly way more powerful than the Atari 2600, being one of the first in-home gaming PCs. Partially developed by Timex, that's right, the people who brought you the electric watch also made one of the most powerful gaming PCs back in the 1980s. But this was basically run around, go to each room, collect crosses while looking at absolutely insane imagery. And I have to say that you can look at any game of this time period and there is nothing that will stand even close to the stuff you're seeing on screen right now. The constant awesome color scheme, the crazy creepy eyes blinking at you. I know this looks kind of old and kind of funny in today's standards, but even with today's standards, there's still something unsettling about this game and the imagery being put on screen all the time. I mean, from giant alligator monsters, of which only nightmares are made from, all the way to just complete heads getting crushed in spike traps and the blood gushing on screen. The graphics were way ahead of its time compared to almost anything else on the market. But the one problem this game did have is it controlled like an AIDS-covered cum falcon, which is understandable why we don't hear anything about this anymore. I mean, you think of something like Pac-Man, you're like, yeah, dude, Pac-Man's been around forever, it's simple, collect the dots, kill the ghosts. But when you look at something like this with all the chaos running around on screen, while I guess the controls were slippier than your mom's vagina, you can completely see why this game didn't have the longevity of something like a Pac-Man and why it kind of stands as just more of an art project than an actual video game. But what really drew me down this rabbit hole wasn't just this game. I have to say, I was looking up some old games, saw the imagery and said, this is tight. Why haven't I heard about this before? Because I'm sorry, if the game ends in the 1980s with a giant green face looking like a Shrek's cum, I want to understand more about it. I want to dive into who this green-covered Shrek cum face is. Why don't I know about this man? Why isn't he a staple in the industry like some of the other greats of that time period? Which brings us to his next big development that he created after Go to Hell. After he told everyone, well done, you are sick as me, he decided to drop something even more sick. I mean, literally, his second game comes with a sick bag. We of course are talking about the game Soft and Cuddly, that's right. The game cover legitimately had a goblin standing on a stack of severed heads. It's the type of stuff that if you saw this at a Blockbuster as a child, you would have pissed yourself and cried to your little mommy like a bitch. It's terrifying, and that's not even getting into the imagery in the game. Look at these babies stretching and trying to pull apart while they're amalgamation of 4 different heads. It's absolutely grotesque. Almost every single thing you see in this game is a step up from what we saw in the last iteration. This is worlds apart more graphic than what you would have seen on anything else in the 1980s, let alone in 1987 when this game released, causing critics to go absolutely nutso in insane mode, calling the game disturbing and disgusting. It's the type of stuff where you would probably cut your toenails with a Rambo knife. That is almost a quote, I paraphrased, but basically, people said that if you like this game, there's pretty much something wrong with you. But alas, this game had a lot of the similar issues that the last iteration had, with even though it was a side-scroller with a jetpack, it still controlled like absolute AIDS dragon bullshit. But again, I don't think that was the developer's intention to make an insanely good video game. I think he just wanted it as an art piece. When asked what possessed you to write a game like Soft and Cuddly, Jones responded, "I didn't write the game because I'm a horrible person. I wrote it to amuse myself. I love the reactions people give. I can't stand nice, inoffensive things." The bro was just going absolutely insano mode. He even said the original version of the game was supposed to be more grotesque. The babies, instead of being stretched, were supposed to be torn apart and ripped, and blood was supposed to be everywhere. The sheep was bouncing up and down on corpses. The game was absolutely supposed to try to make you throw up. His goal was to make all the audiences that played this game uncomfortable and afraid. It was an art project first and foremost, just like almost everything he seemed to make. And when asked what he was going to do next, he said, "I don't know, dude, I'm fucking bored. I'm probably never gonna make a game again. Did you know I'm starting a band?" And then we never hear from him again. I don't know what happened with that band. Maybe they tried to sign a deal with the devil because they read too many stories about crossroad demons and blues musicians, and then ended up being Satan's little whipping bitch boy, constantly taking the seed of Satan's dick, constantly back and forth, edging completion. But it's something that I found incredibly interesting, this little rabbit hole I went down, how some guy at one time decided to take matters into his own hands, grab it by the edge of the shaft, and then just completely stroke it till completion, and then slap the clip for good measure, like a gentleman, like an absolute king. He said, "I don't want to make a normal game. I want to make something that honestly horrifies audiences." What horror is about? We're about scaring people. If you want to make a true horror game, don't look at the mainstream. Say, what are they doing? Haunted house. It was just pixels and bullshit. Oh, the ZX Spectrum is over here. It was made by that fucking watch company, and for some reason, it's super powerful. I'm going to try to utilize that. I'm going to push graphics past what everybody else is pushing. This game was so far ahead of its time, and yet it died of obscurity, mainly because I said the gameplay was absolute fucking hemorrhoids in the anus. But you look at what's on screen and the insanity that he was doing with the colors and the schemes and the level design of all the aesthetics getting slammed in your face like a good Facebook should be. It's something to be admired, and I think that when you look back at games like this, it's something that you should take. If you're a small developer or you're looking at the indie scene, there's a reason that these weird horror indie games pop off so hard. It's because there's still this edginess that's there. There's this idea that I can do this and I can push it past whatever anybody else is saying. It's honestly really inspiring, and it's crazy that this dude just vanishes off the edge of the earth. He decides, "I'm done, that's it. I had some cool shit. I gave you a sick bag that the game came in. We got a goblin standing on a bunch of corpses, kind of like Hassan whenever there's a Uyghur genocide." Something about this that I think is missing in the modern gaming industry and landscape. There's something about how a lot of games have become desensitized and kind of moving away from anything that could be deemed as a little bit edgy. When at this time, you could look at people like John George Jones, who saw the gaming landscape being boring in his eyes and saying, "How can I spice this up? How can I truly drum out some controversy and show some grotesque horror that audiences might not be ready for, but I think they are. I'm going to push those bounds." I mean, even the AAA industry has tried this. Go look at Dante Inferno's marketing. I remember when that game was coming out, they had like whole petitions where they were like, we need to shut this game down. It's anti-Christian. It's trying to be too horrendous. I mean, the game literally released on 9/9/9, and if you pre-ordered it, you got $6.66 off just because they wanted to push that line. They wanted to drum out that own controversy from the world. They're like, look how edgy and horrific our game is. Look how crazy this is. And now we live in a world of people that are just always trying to be inoffensive and trying to be safe. And I think it's hurt the art form that is video games as a whole. Now, you might not agree with me. You might say that, oh, well, anything offensive should be deemed too bad and we should kick it off the shelves. And that's wrong to me, because in order to have true innovation, you have to push the grounds of what's okay, especially with something like horror. When you look at the horror industry, if we were always unwilling to make people uneasy, the industry would have gone nowhere. So I think it takes crazy games like this to push the bounds of what was okay, to then open up doors for later games to proceed. I mean, if it wasn't for Haunted House, this game wouldn't have existed, and this game pushed what audiences were ready to see at the time period to eventually open doors for games like Resident Evil. It's just like you look at the history history of things and understand how it got there to then retroactively try to go the other way, I think is very dangerous to a creative mindset. And I know I'm kind of getting on a soapbox right now, but that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this insane chaos monster that is this game. Do you think any other game in the 80s had heads getting crushed the way this motherfucker is crushing heads? Absolutely not. Motherfuckers was scared of a crushing head. Motherfucker look at a crushing head and be like, oh no, it's too scary. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. And this guy was like, nah, dude, crush all the heads, rip all the babies apart. And to be honest, I wish the guy wouldn't have gotten bored with making video games. I wish he wouldn't have been too and out. I wish he would have actually went in and looked at what some of the other games in the industry were doing in terms of play style and better actual playing, so the game wasn't just a fucking art piece, and would have made something that was timeless and eventually became like a staple in the industry, because I think he had the ability to do so, but he decided to just quit and go start a fucking grunge band. What the fuck are we even talking about? Now nobody knows who the fuck this guy is. The guy's just gone, disappeared, without a trace. He's dust in the wind. That's all I got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and if you're a small indie developer out there and you had a couple of games and people call them offensive or too grotesque or something, just remember to keep pushing those lines, keep trying new things. You might end up hitting one out of the parking, having your own Postal, having your own Grand Theft Auto, and that's what pushes the industry, is doing something that nobody has done before in a way that nobody's thought to do it. And I think that John George Jones, even though he wasn't the ultimately biggest success story in the video game industry throughout history, I think that he did stuff that nobody had done before. He pushed graphics where they hadn't been pushed before, and these games were way ahead of their time, even though the playstyle was way before its time. There was something of an anomaly that happened with this series, and I'm so interested in it, and I wish that we had more information on this man. So if you know anything, let me know down in the comments below. Maybe if you found something more than the interview I found. Honestly, the most of what you're going to find on these series is going to be on Wikipedia and a few little articles here and there. It's just so sparse. So maybe if you know somebody who knew something about this game, or you have a cousin who sucked him off one time in the stalls of a bathroom, let me know down in the comments below, guys. I love you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.